Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Assistant Professor Neto. Now, let me share to you my perspective as a biochemist on traditional and alternative smoking. There are two major diseases that have been associated with smoking. One is cancer, and the other one is cardiovascular disorders. According to the Center for Disease Control, smoking is related to cancer because of two reasons. One, it weakens our immune system, and the other one is it damages our DNA, which is actually the center of the cell, which is responsible for communication by production of proteins that is related to cell regulation. The other one is on cardiovascular disorders. Smoking is related to cardiovascular diseases because it has been known to start atherosclerosis formation, which is the main cause of several cardiovascular disorders. Okay. Now, let me now share to you the contents of cigarette that is highly related and associated to the initiation of two diseases, the cancer and cardiovascular disorder. There's no problem when you do not burn your cigarette because it only contains cellulose, the secondary metabolites, which contains alkaloids, phenolics, and terpenes. Nicotine is one of the examples of these secondary metabolites, as well as your polyaromatic hydrocarbons. There is also heavy metals, which is a product of the bioaccumulation of the tobacco plant from the soil. When you combust this tobacco, it is the time that you produce your toxins. So in effect, during pyrolysis, which reaches up to 900 degrees Celsius, you produce your polyaromatic hydrocarbons. A good example of that is the benzoylpyrene, which is the known carcinogen, the primary carcinogen in cigarettes. You also have your reactive oxygen species, nitrosamine and nitrogen oxides, formaldehyde, cyanide, heavy metals, which is vaporized, carbon monoxide, and nicotine. Of all these toxic substances found in the combusted cigarette, I will focus on these three, the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, reactive oxygen species, and nitrosamine and nitrogen oxides, as they are the main ingredient in the cigarette smoke that causes these two diseases that I have already mentioned. Okay. One is cancer. Cancer biologically is defined as uncontrolled cell division. Okay. Cancer is actually regulated by two genes, or all cells in our body is regulated by two genes, the oncogenes and the tumor suppressor genes. Now, if you want to understand cancer, you have to understand how the cell cycle works. So you have your different phases of the cell cycle, which is controlled and regulated by oncogenes and the tumor suppressor genes. The oncogene initiates the cell division, while the tumor suppressor gene regulates the cell division. So it's like a stop and go process during the process of the cell cycle. The problem is when your oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes are affected by the toxins produced by cigarette, and that initiates the carcinogenesis or tumorigenesis. Okay, so how does these toxic substances affect your genes? One is intercalation by polyaromatic hydrocarbon. As I have told you, no, your polyaromatic hydrocarbon is the main ingredient in the carcinogenesis or in the production of or tumorigenesis. No, so what happens is these polyaromatic hydrocarbons, they intercalate to your DNA. Another component which triggers carcinogenesis are the reactive oxygen species and the nitrogen monoxide, which trigger DNA damage, causing the DNA to be cut, no, and eliminating some portions of your DNA. In analogy, can you just look at this example, no? So, for example, your DNA encodes for the phrase "I am your best friend." If there is an intercalating agent, for example, a letter A that intercalates between the letter E and the S of the word best, you now have a new message, which actually is a totally different message and makes the cell confused. Similarly, when you have your reactive oxygen species and nitrogen monoxide affecting your DNA, a certain portion is cut, no, off from your DNA. So For example, the same message being sent by your DNA to the cell, I am your best friend, and it cuts between F and R. So the message of the cell now becomes, I am your best F. It will really give you a totally different message, which will confuse the cell. So, and that in that process, what happens is the cell is sending a different message, making it confused. Hence, what happens is there is a problem in the cell division process. That's why there is uncontrolled cell division, and that initiates the tumorigenesis, hence your cancer. Another one is atherosclerosis. Okay, so smoking is connected to cardiovascular disorder because it initiates the formation of atherosclerosis. Okay, so the reactive oxygen species and the nitrogen monoxide, they can oxidize the fatty acids present in the LDL or low density lipoprotein. This causes the oxidized LDL to be absorbed by the macrophage, which in turn initiates the formation of the foam cell, forming the inflammation, causing the formation of the atherosclerotic plaque. Hence, it is the primary source of several cardiovascular disorders, which includes hypertension, and you also have your stroke and myocardial infarction. So these mechanisms are the ones which trigger people to think, how are we going to reduce the harm that is caused by cigarette? Hence, you have your smoking alternatives. So you have two types of smoking alternatives. One is the heat not burn, and the other one is the e-cigarette. What is the difference between the two? The heat not burn utilizes the same tobacco, but it is heated to a lower temperature at 400 degrees Celsius. On the contrary, the vapor does not use tobacco, but it may have different additives or flavorings which will be delivered upon the vaporization of the e-liquid. Okay. So what are the contents of these two alternatives? One is the heat not burn. It produces the same content uh, with the regular smoke because it uses the same tobacco, but relatively with very, very significantly low amount of toxic substances. For example, the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, no, it can be reduced up to 6 to 9% of its original component as compared to the traditional smoking. The reactive oxygen species up to as low as 13%. You have your nitrosamine nitrogen oxide up to 2% to 3%, and so on and so forth. While for the e-cigarette, the problem with the e-cigarette is uh, it has a variable component, no? But the advantage of e-cigarette is there is non-detectable concentration of harmful and potentially harmful compounds. Okay, sometimes it has nicotine and heavy metals, which is caused by leaching. The question now is with these components, what can we infer? No, can we infer that it is safe? For you to understand its safety, several publications have already been made on the use of this alternative smoking. As a biochemist, my perspective on alternative cigarettes as safe is one, because of the small amount or because it has greatly reduced the amount of toxic substances, we can say that it is a potentially less harmful alternative to traditional cigarette smoking. However, as a researcher, we still have to look at the long-term effects of this um, alternative to smoking. So, as a biochemist, no, and as a previous smoker, we the best option is still cessation. And again, if we cannot perform this because this is very ideal, we can actually look for the alternative. And with that, I guess that I have already made my discussion on the biochemical perspective of smoking. Thank you.